This month, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was removed from power by a coalition of three right-wing parties that have coalesced to form the new government. The leaders of these parties include Naftali Bennett, Avigdor Lieberman, and Gideon Saar, all of whom once worked for Netanyahu. For a combined total of 15 years, Netanyahu is Israel's longest-serving prime minister. He first assumed the post during a brief stint as prime minister in the late 1990s, before commencing his second tenure in the position from 2009 onwards. Publicly hailed as King Bibi, Netanyahu dominated Israeli politics, his name etched in the very notion of the word Israel on the world stage. His strongman personality has deeply divided the country, with critics accusing him of corruption, undermining judicial independence, silencing journalists, and gratifying political supporters in the interest of preserving power. Mirroring other populist leaders worldwide, Netanyahu routinely inflamed populist sentiment against the all too familiar deep state, specifically fake news media and the leftist elite. By playing the victim, Netanyahu rallied his die-hard supporters against his perceived enemies, concealing his grip on power. In 2009, Netanyahu was indicted on multiple charges of corruption, including fraud, breach of trust, and accepting bribes. Hence, his need to stay in power only escalated as he tried to use his position to gain immunity from prosecution. By exacerbating his rhetoric against the deep state, Netanyahu convinced his supporters and political allies that he was being unfairly persecuted. The tensions worked to intimidate the lawyers and judges working on his criminal trial. Coupled with this incessant need to avoid prosecution, Netanyahu struggled to preserve his coalition in parliament following the April 2019 election, where his Likud movement emerged as the largest party but was unable to form a new coalition government. Two more inconclusive elections consequently followed. After the third, Netanyahu formed a government with then opposition leader Benny Gantz from the Blue and White Alliance. Unfortunately, the deal collapsed and Israelis headed to the polls in March. Once again, Likud emerged as the largest party, but was unable to form a coalition government. As a result, in accordance with the Israeli constitution, this responsibility fell on Mr. Lapid, whose Yesh Atid came second. Discussions subsequently ensued, culminating in the coalition of numerous left, centre and right-wing parties, who collaborated to remove Netanyahu through a slim 61 to 59 seat majority in the Knesset this month. You might be asking, does this new government have much hope of succeeding? For now, the answer is uncertain. The coalition consists of parties with significant ideological differences, including the first independent Arab party to be part of a ruling coalition, RAM, which supports the two-state solution. The inclusion of RAM, left-wing non-Arab Israeli parties, and far right-wing parties like Yamina and New Hope, which fervently supports Jewish settlement in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, is likely to hinder any resolute progress made by Israel's new coalition government towards resolving divisions with Palestine. There is also the likelihood of disagreements over domestic social policies. While some parties support the advancement of gay rights, RAM, an Islamist party, opposes it. In response to the possibility of tensions within this new government, the new Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said, "Nobody will have to give up their ideology, but all will have to postpone the realization of some of their dreams. We'll focus on what can be achieved, rather than arguing about what cannot." The response from the Palestinians so far has been indifferent. In Gaza, Hamas officials Sami Abu Zuhri said, "We aren't counting on any change in the occupation governments, since they are united on the policy of killing Palestinians and confiscating Palestinian rights." Another spokesman for Hamas, Fawzi Bahoum, stated that regardless of the shape of the government of Israel, it will not alter the way we look at the Zionist entity. It is a settler-occupier entity that must be resisted by all forms of resistance, foremost of which is armed resistance. Meanwhile, a spokesman for Mahmoud Abbas's Palestinian Authority, Nabil Abu Rudenay, said, "This is an internal Israeli affair. Our position has always been clear. What we want is a Palestinian state on the 1967 borders with Jerusalem as its capital." The lack of hope towards this new government comes as far right-wing groups marched through occupied East Jerusalem. The flag-waving march on Tuesday reignited tensions with Palestinians in the wake of the formation of this new Israeli government. Around 17 Palestinians were arrested by Israeli security personnel, and countless more were assaulted and quickly removed from the Damascus Gate Plaza leading to East Jerusalem's Old City. Israeli police also set up metal barriers on the roads leading into Damascus Gate, preventing the entry of Palestinians. The March of Flags was meant to celebrate the anniversary of Israel's 1967 occupation of the city's eastern part. Naftali Bennett's new government was largely quiet on the matter, with only the centrist Yair Lapid to be Prime Minister in 2023, saying, "It's inconceivable how you can hold an Israeli flag and shout, 'Death to Arabs,' at the same time. These people are a disgrace to the nation of Israel." Many of these protesters label Naftali as a traitor who was willing to side with centrists and Arab leftists over his traditional base of far right-wing supporters to form this new government. Hence, any objections from him in the aftermath of the march will only intensify the animosity currently against him. While Palestinians claim that there is no hope that things will get better under this new government, I beg to differ. I think that there is some hope. After all, Naftali does lead a coalition of parties in his new government, including numerous moderate, centrist and left-wing parties. To preserve power, Naftali must cater to their interests as well as his own. The parliamentary majority that brought him to power is very slim. It only takes 2 seats to flip for Netanyahu to return to power. Thus, Naftali would need to compromise, significantly watering down his policy proposals. This includes his approach to Palestinian relations. Naftali is also keenly aware that Lapid will replace him in 2023. The moderate is likely to make further attempts to reach a peace settlement with Palestine. The beauty of this new government is the hope it brings for the region. The removal of Netanyahu eliminates the core far right-wing ideology that influenced his governing policies. In its replacement, Naftali's government and its more moderate positions in the interests of preserving power should be a source of hope for Palestinians.